There are promises we must keep not because the law demands it, but because our souls require it. This is the story of a man who learned that lesson the hardest way possible in the unforgiving heat of the Arizona Territory, where the desert sun burns away everything except the truth. The year was 1882.
Take that! Yeah! Keep
and
firing!
The land stretched
Charge!
endless
Yeah!
and
Yeah!
cool under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Along the banks of the San Simon River, where the water ran shallow and precious, a solitary figure moved through the afternoon heat. Samuel Mackenzie, though most folks just called him Sam, guided his horse slowly along the rocky shore, his eyes scanning the horizon out of habit more than hope. At 34 years old, Sam had the weathered look of a man who had seen too much and felt too little. His face was carved by wind and sun, his hands rough from work, his eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore the simple clothes of a rancher, nothing fancy, nothing to draw attention. That was how he liked it. Invisible, alone. 4 years had passed since he buried his wife and the child she carried, both taken by fever in a single terrible week. 4 years since he stopped believing that goodness existed anywhere in this harsh world. He had retreated to his small ranch near the river, a place called Mackenzie Creek, and there he stayed, speaking to no one, wanting nothing, expecting less. The land around him shimmered in the heat. Mesquite trees cast thin shadows that offered little relief. In the distance, the Chiricahua Mountains rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks touched with purple haze. This was Apache country, always had been, and Sam respected that. His late wife had been half Navajo, and she had taught him something precious before she died. She taught him that honor was not just a word you spoke. It was a way you lived every single day, even when no one was watching.
Take that! Yeah!
The horse's
Keep
hooves
firing!
made soft,
Charge!
crunching
Yeah!
sounds
Yeah!
on the gravelly shore. Sam was thinking about nothing in particular, the way a man does when he has given up hoping for anything to change when he heard it. A sound, small, desperate, a child's voice calling out in fear. Sam's head snapped up. His eyes swept the riverbank, searching. There. About 50 yards ahead, near where the water deepened and swirled around a cluster of large boulders, he saw movement. A small figure, dark hair wet and plastered to a tiny head clinging to a rock as the current tugged at her body. Sam did not think. He simply acted. He urged his horse forward, then dismounted in one fluid motion, hitting the ground running. His boots splashed into the shallow water at the river's edge. The child was losing her grip. Her fingers, small and brown, slipped on the wet stone. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream that the river's rush nearly swallowed. Sam crashed through the water. It rose to his knees, then his thighs. The current was stronger than it looked, pulling at his legs, trying to knock him off balance. He pushed forward. The girl's hand slipped completely off the rock. She began to tumble into the deeper channel where the water ran fast and dark. Sam lunged. His hand shot out and caught her wrist. For one terrible second they both nearly went under, pulled by the strength of the current. But Sam's other hand found a boulder, his fingers digging into the rough surface, and he held on, held them both. His muscles screamed.
Take that!
The
Yeah!
water roared
Keep firing!
around them.
Charge!
Then,
Yeah!
with a
Yeah!
grunt of effort, he pulled the girl toward him, lifting her against his chest. She was so light, so fragile. He could feel her heart hammering against his ribs like a frightened bird. He turned, fighting the current, and made his way back to the shallow water, then to the muddy bank. He set the girl down gently on the dry ground. She collapsed onto her hands and knees, coughing up water, her whole body shaking. Sam knelt beside her, one hand on her back, steadying her. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "You're safe." The girl looked up at him. She could not have been more than 7 years old. Her eyes were enormous, dark as river stones, filled with fear and confusion. Her clothes, simple cotton dress, torn and muddy, hung soaked on her thin frame. She stared at him, this strange white man, and said nothing. Sam looked around. No one else was visible. No mother calling, no family searching, just empty land and endless sky and this terrified child who had somehow ended up alone in the river. He stood, walked to his horse, and pulled his coat from behind the saddle. It was too large for her, but it was dry. He came back and draped it over her shoulders. The girl flinched but did not pull away. "It's all right," Sam said softer now. He tried a few words in Apache, simple phrases his wife had taught him years ago. The words felt clumsy in his mouth, probably mispronounced, but he tried anyway. "Safe. No hurt. Safe." The girl's eyes widened slightly. Recognition flickered there. Not full understanding, but enough. Enough to know he was trying. Sam's ranch was only 10 minutes away on foot. He could not leave her here. Whatever had happened wherever her family was, she needed help now. He gestured toward the ranch, making his meaning clear with movements more than words. The girl hesitated, then nodded, a tiny dip of her chin. He did not try to carry her. Instead, he walked slowly, and she followed, still wrapped in his oversized coat, her bare feet leaving small prints in the dust beside his boot tracks. At the ranch, Sam led her inside the small cabin he called home. It was simple, clean, spare. A stone fireplace, a wooden table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner. Nothing fancy but solid. Honest work, honestly made. He stoked the fire until flames crackled to life, then pulled one of the chairs close to the warmth. The girl sat without being told, her eyes following his every movement, still wary, but no longer terrified. Sam moved around the kitchen area, quiet and methodical. He heated water in a pot, found a clean cloth, poured some of the warm water into a cup. He set the cup in front of her, then stepped back, giving her space. She looked at the cup for a long moment, then picked it up with both hands and drank. When she lowered it, some color had returned to her face. Sam ladled soup into a wooden bowl. It was simple fare, nothing special. Beans and a bit of salted meat, the kind of food a man makes when he is cooking only for himself and has forgotten what it means to care about flavor. He cut a thick slice of bread from the loaf on the counter and placed both bowl and bread in front of the girl. She stared at the food. Her hand reached out, fingers trembling slightly, and touched the edge of the bowl, as if testing whether it was real. Then, with a small sniffling sound, she began to eat. Not fast. Carefully. As though she had learned not to trust good things. Sam moved to the other side of the room and sat in the second chair. He picked up a worn bridle that needed mending and began working on it with his hands. He did not stare at her, did not ask questions, just worked, letting her eat in peace, letting her see that he was not a threat. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind whispered through the mesquite trees. For the first time in years, Sam's cabin held more than just silence and ghosts. After a while, the girl stopped eating. She looked over at him, studying his face. Then she spoke, her voice small but clear. "White man cook bad." Sam looked up surprised. Then, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he smiled. Just a small one, barely there, but real. "You're right about that," he said. "I'm even worse with coffee." The corner of the girl's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close. The ice was breaking. Sam stood and poured more water into her cup. As he set it down, he noticed the delicate bracelet on her wrist. It was intricately woven, adorned with small turquoise beads, the kind of work that spoke of patience and tradition. Apache work, beautiful and meaningful. "I had a little girl once," Sam said quietly, almost to himself. "She would have been about your age now." The words came out before he could stop them. He had not spoken of his daughter to anyone ever since the day they laid her tiny coffin in the ground beside her mother. But somehow in this moment, with this child looking at him with those dark, knowing eyes, the words slipped free. He did not say more, did not explain. But the girl seemed to understand something in his tone, something in the sadness that lived behind his eyes. She looked at him differently then, not with fear, with something gentler. The afternoon light slanted through the window, golden and warm. Sam returned to his chair and his work. The girl finished her water and curled up in the chair by the fire, the coat still wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes grew heavy. Within minutes, she was asleep. Sam watched her for a moment. Something stirred in his chest, something he had thought was dead. Not quite hope, not yet, but perhaps the faintest shadow of what hope might feel like if it ever returned. He had no idea in that quiet moment that everything was about to change. The sound of hoofbeats woke him from his thoughts. Sam's hand instinctively went to the rifle leaning against the wall near the door. He moved to the window and looked out. 2 riders approached. One was a woman, tall and graceful, sitting her horse with the ease of someone born to the saddle. The other was a young man warrior, lean, a bow slung across his back. Both were Apache. Both looked dangerous. Sam did not reach for his gun. Instead, he opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, hands visible, empty, non-threatening. The universal language of a man who does not want trouble. The woman dismounted. She moved with purpose, her long dark hair braided down her back, her clothing a mix of traditional Apache dress and practical frontier wear. Her face was striking, high cheekbones and fierce eyes that missed nothing. She looked to be about 30 years old, and she carried herself with the kind of dignity that made men step aside. She walked straight past Sam into his cabin as if she owned the place. The young warrior stayed outside, his hand resting on his bow, eyes locked on Sam. Inside, Sam heard a small cry of joy, the girl's voice suddenly bright and alive. "Mother!" Sam stayed on the porch waiting. After a moment, the woman emerged, the child in her arms. She held the girl close, her face pressed against the small dark head, and for just a second the fierce mask cracked. Sam saw the fear beneath the terror of a mother who thought she had lost everything. Then the mask returned. The woman set the girl down gently and turned to face Sam. She studied him with those intense eyes, taking in his worn clothes, his weathered face, his empty hands. She saw the coat still draped over her daughter's shoulders. She saw the empty soup bowl visible through the doorway. She spoke in English, accented but clear. Her voice carried the weight of ceremony. "You saved my daughter." It was not a question. "Anyone would have done the same," Sam replied. "No," the woman said flatly. "Not anyone. Not most." She looked down at her daughter, then back at Sam. Something shifted in her expression. What came next was spoken slowly, deliberately, each word chosen with care. "By the law of our ancestors, the Chiricahua people, when a person saves the life of our child and gives that child food, that person becomes bound to our family. This is not gratitude. This is covenant. You, Samuel Mackenzie, are now linked to our bloodline." Sam blinked. "Ma'am, I don't understand what you mean." The young warrior, still standing by the horses, spoke for the first time. His English was better than the woman's. "She is saying you are family now. We protect you. You protect us. It is sacred bond. Cannot be broken." Sam looked from the warrior to the woman to the little girl who gazed up at him with those enormous eyes. He felt something like panic rising in his chest. He had not asked for this. Had not wanted any connection, any obligation, any reason to care about anything or anyone. But looking at the child, remembering the feel of her small body in his arms as he pulled her from the river, remembering the terror in her eyes and the trust that had slowly replaced it, he found he could not say no. "I don't know what this means," he said honestly, "but if you're saying the girl is under my protection, then yes, I accept that." The woman's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect, perhaps, or the beginning of it. Then from somewhere in the distance came a sound that made all of them turn, a rifle shot echoing across the plains. Then another. The young warrior tensed his hand, moving to his bow. The woman's expression hardened. "Reeves," the warrior said, almost spitting the name. "The hunter. He has followed us for many days now." The woman looked at Sam. "There is a bounty, $300. They say I killed a man at Fort Apache. I did not. But no one believes the word of an Apache woman." "Who put up the bounty?" Sam asked. "A man named Whitmore. He owns mines and land. He wants Apache territory. He wants us gone. Killing us one by one or paying others to do it is his way." Sam felt something cold settle in his gut. He knew the name Whitmore. Everyone in the territory did. Rich, powerful, connected. The kind of man who got what he wanted, legal or not. "You can't go back out there," Sam said. "Not if this Reeves is hunting you." "I will not hide," the woman said, her voice hard as iron. "It's not hiding. It's staying alive long enough to prove your innocence." She studied him for a long moment. The little girl, sensing the tension, moved closer to her mother, but kept one hand on Sam's coat, still wearing it. "Why would you help us?" the woman asked. "You do not know me." Sam looked down at the child. "I know her, and she needs her mother." The woman's expression softened just slightly. She nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "We will stay tonight. Tomorrow you go to Fort Apache. You speak to the marshal. You show him I am not a killer." "I'll try," Sam said, "but I can't promise anything." "You saved my daughter," the woman said. "You fed her. You gave her warmth and safety. You have already given more than most men would. I will not ask for promises, only for your effort." The young warrior finally relaxed slightly, lowering his hand from the bow. He spoke to the woman in Apache rapid words Sam could not follow. She replied briefly, then turned back to Sam. "My name is Neshoba," she said. "It means wolf in our language. This is my daughter. Her name is Lily, a name given by her father before he died, and that is Young Bear, Warrior, and Friend." "Samuel Mackenzie," Sam replied, "but most call me Sam." Neshoba nodded. "Sam." She tested the name, her accent making it sound different, somehow more formal. "You are a strange man, Sam, but perhaps that is not a bad thing." Night fell over Mackenzie Creek. Young Bear rode away to inform the tribe that Neshoba and Lily were safe, promising to return by dawn. Inside the cabin, Sam gave Neshoba and Lily his bed while he prepared to sleep in the chair by the fire. Lily was already asleep, exhausted by the day's ordeal. Neshoba sat on the edge of the bed, watching Sam arrange a blanket across the chair. "Your wife," she said quietly. She was not white. Sam paused. "How did you know I was married?" "The way you folded my daughter's hair when it was wet. Gentle, like someone who knew how. And the coat. It is made in the Navajo style, stitched by a woman's hand." Sam nodded slowly. "She died 4 years ago. Fever took her and our unborn child in the same week." "I am sorry." "So am I." Silence settled between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood loss, who had both buried pieces of their hearts in the hard ground and learned to keep walking anyway. "My husband died 2 seasons ago," Neshoba said, "shot by a bounty hunter who thought he was someone else. No one was punished. No one even cared." "The world isn't fair," Sam said. "No." Neshoba agreed. "But some people try to make it more fair. You are one of those people, I think." Sam did not know what to say to that. He settled into the chair, pulling the blanket over himself. The fire crackled low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside in the darkness, Sam could see a small campfire burning on a distant ridge. Reeves no doubt waiting, watching, patient as a buzzard circling dying prey. Sam closed his eyes, but sleep did not come easily. He had made a promise today without fully understanding it. He had taken responsibility for 2 lives, bound himself to people he barely knew, stepped into a conflict that was not his fight. And yet somehow it felt right. It felt like the first right thing he had done in 4 long years of just existing. "God," he whispered into the darkness, "I didn't ask for this. But if it's here, help me not to fail them." In the bed across the room, Neshoba heard those words. She said nothing, but something in her heart softened toward this strange, sad white man who had saved her daughter and now promised to save them both. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Tomorrow would test them all. But tonight, for the first time in too long, none of them were alone. And in the harsh Arizona territory where the sun burned and the nights froze and death waited around every corner, that was something worth holding on to. Dawn broke over Mackenzie Creek with the kind of light that makes men believe for just a moment that the world might be beautiful after all. The sky turned from black to deep purple to rose gold, and the first rays of sun touched the peaks of the Chiricahua Mountains like a promise that had not yet been broken. Sam was already awake. He had been awake for hours, watching the darkness fade, listening to the sounds of two people breathing softly in sleep behind him. It had been so long since his home held anyone but himself that the sound felt both strange and achingly familiar, like remembering a language he thought he had forgotten. He stood quietly and moved to the door, stepping outside into the cool morning air. His breath misted in front of him. The campfire on the distant ridge had gone out sometime in the night, but Sam knew Reeves was still there, still watching. Men like Reeves did not give up easily, especially when $300 was at stake. Behind him, he heard movement. Neshoba emerged from the cabin, already dressed, her hair freshly braided. She moved like water, silent and purposeful. She came to stand beside him, following his gaze toward the ridge where Reeves had camped. "He will not let us go," she said simply. "No," Sam agreed. "Men like him never do." "Then we must go to Fort Apache today. We must speak truth before he speaks lies." Sam turned to look at her. In the morning light, her expression was resolute, a mixture of worry and unwavering determination. But there was something else there, too, something he had not noticed in yesterday's chaos. Worry. Fear, carefully hidden, but present nonetheless. She was a mother terrified for her child, and that fear made her both dangerous and vulnerable. "I'll hitch the wagon," Sam said. "We'll take Lily with us. Safer than leaving her here." Neshoba nodded. "I do not hide. I will go and speak my truth." "I know," Sam said. And somehow he did know. This woman would not run, would not cower. Whatever came, she would face it, standing tall. Inside the cabin, Lily was waking. Sam could hear her small voice speaking in Apache and Neshoba's gentle reply. He went to prepare the wagon, hitching his two best horses, checking the wheels and the harness, with the careful attention of a man who knew that details could mean the difference between life and death. By the time the sun had fully risen, they were ready. Sam helped Lily into the back of the wagon, where he had arranged blankets to make a comfortable seat. Neshoba climbed up beside him on the driving bench. Sam took up the reins. They had traveled less than a mile when the riders appeared, 3 of them coming fast from the east, kicking up dust. Sam recognized the way they rode, loose and aggressive. Hired guns, not lawmen. He pulled the wagon to a stop and waited, his hand resting casually near the Winchester rifle beside his seat. The riders circled them and stopped. The leader was Jake Reeves himself, a man in his mid-30s with the bloated face of someone who drank too much and cared too little. His eyes were red-rimmed and mean. The 2 men with him were younger, harder, the kind who would do anything for money and had probably done most things already. Reeves leaned forward in his saddle, his hand on his pistol. "Mackenzie, you're making a mistake here." "How's that, Reeves?" "That Apache woman is wanted. There's a legal bounty. You're harboring a fugitive." Sam kept his voice calm, conversational. "I don't see any warrant. Just hear about a bounty. Those are 2 different things. The warrant's coming. Whitmore's seeing to it. Makes no difference. I got a right to collect." "You got a right to follow the law," Sam said. "Not to murder people for money." Reeves's face darkened. His hand tightened on his gun. "You calling me a murderer?" "I'm calling you a man who shoots first and doesn't bother with questions after. Seen your type before." For a moment, violence hung in the air like the smell before a storm. Reeves's finger moved toward the trigger. Sam's hand was already on the Winchester, ready to bring it up. Then from behind them, another voice called out, "Morning, gentlemen. Fine day for a ride, isn't it?" Everyone turned. A wagon was approaching from the direction of Fort Apache, driven by a small, round Mexican woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Maria Santos, who owned the general store in Red Rock and had a talent for appearing at exactly the right moment. She pulled her wagon alongside Sam, smiling pleasantly, as if she had not just interrupted a potential killing. "Mr. Mackenzie, Mrs. Santos sends her regards. And Mr. Reeves, I believe Sheriff Bradley was looking for you in town. Something about unpaid debts." Reeves glared at her, but the moment had passed. With witnesses present, even he was not quite bold enough to start shooting. He pointed a finger at Sam. "This ain't over, Mackenzie. You're a dead man." "Maybe," Sam said quietly, "but not today." Reeves jerked his horse around and rode off, his two companions following. Dust settled slowly in their wake. Maria Santos turned her shrewd gaze on Sam. "You are collecting dangerous friends, Mr. Mackenzie." "Seems that way," Sam agreed. "Fort Apache is where you're headed." "Yes, ma'am." "Then we'll travel together. Safety in numbers, as they say." She glanced at Neshoba, at Lily in the back of the wagon, and something shifted in her expression. Understanding, perhaps, or sympathy. "Besides, I have business with Doc Fletcher. Convenient for us all." Sam nodded his thanks. Maria Santos was not a woman you argued with, and her presence was indeed a blessing. Reeves would think twice before attacking two wagons in broad daylight. They traveled together, the two wagons moving side by side when the road allowed it. Maria kept up a steady stream of conversation, asking nothing about Neshoba, but talking about everything else. The weather, the crops, the latest gossip from Red Rock. It was a kindness, Sam realized, this chatter. It filled the space where fear might have grown. Lily watched the older woman with fascination. After a while, Maria pulled out a wrapped bundle from her wagon and handed it back. "Empanadas," she said. "Still warm. Growing children must eat." Lily took one cautiously, then bit into it. Her face lit up with surprised delight. Maria laughed. "Better than white man's cooking, yes?" Even Neshoba smiled at that just a little. They reached Fort Apache by midday. The fort was not large, just a collection of wooden buildings surrounded by a low wall, but it represented law and order in a land that had precious little of either. Soldiers moved about their duties. A few Apache scouts working for the army watched the wagons arrive with careful, neutral expressions. Sam helped Neshoba and Lily down from the wagon. Maria excused herself, heading toward the sutler's store. Sam led Neshoba and Lily toward the medical building where Doc Henry Fletcher kept his practice. Doc Fletcher was 58 years old, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He had served as a surgeon during the war, had seen Sam through some of the worst days of that terrible time, and the two men had remained friends in the years since. If anyone at Fort Apache would listen, it would be Doc. The doctor looked up from his desk as they entered, his expression moving from surprise to concern as he took in the scene. Sam grim-faced, an Apache woman proud and wary, a small girl clinging to her mother's hand. "Sam," Doc said carefully, "what's this about?" "Need your help, Henry. Need you to listen." Doc Fletcher gestured to the chairs. "Then sit. Tell me everything." Sam told the story. The rescue at the river, the bounty, Whitmore's involvement, the accusations of murder. Doc listened without interrupting, his face growing more troubled with each detail. When Sam finished, Doc turned to Neshoba. "Ma'am, do you speak English?" "Yes," Neshoba said. "Enough. Then tell me your version, in your own words." Neshoba's voice was steady, but Sam could hear the effort it took to keep it that way. "I did not kill the white man. I was not at the saloon that night. I was gathering medicine plants in the hills with my daughter. The man who died, McAllister was his name. He was killed by one of Whitmore's men, a man called Cole. They fought over money. Cole stabbed him. Then Whitmore said it was Apache who did it. Said it was me. He offers money to anyone who brings my body." "Can you prove you weren't there?" Doc asked gently. "Red Sky Walker was with me. He is elder of my people. He saw me in the hills all that night." Doc sighed. "An Apache elder can't testify in territorial court. The law doesn't allow it." Sam felt anger rise in his chest. "That's not justice, Henry." "No," Doc agreed. "It's not. But it's the law." He looked at Neshoba with real compassion. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I believe you. But belief and proof are different things in a courtroom." "Then what can we do?" Sam asked. "We need to speak with Marshal Daniels. He's a fair man, as fair as they come out here. If anyone will listen and investigate properly, it's him." Doc led them across the fort grounds to the marshal's office. John Daniels was a weathered man of 50, with sharp eyes and a reputation for honesty that was rare in the territory. He listened to their story with the same careful attention Doc had shown, asking occasional questions, his face revealing nothing. When they finished, he sat back in his chair and was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "Mrs. Neshoba, I've heard about this case. Whitmore filed a complaint 3 weeks ago. He claims you murdered his foreman and burned his supply warehouse." "The warehouse too?" Sam asked. "She's being accused of arson as well." "Yes. Whitmore says she burned it to destroy evidence. He has 3 witnesses who claim they saw her near the warehouse the night it burned." "All 3 work for Whitmore," Sam said flatly. "I'm aware of that, Mr. Mackenzie. I'm also aware that Clayton Whitmore owns half this territory and has more money than God. That doesn't make him right, but it does make him powerful." "So what happens now?" Sam asked. "Now I investigate. Properly. I'll ride out to Red Rock, talk to witnesses who don't work for Whitmore. Talk to the bartender at the saloon. See what I can find." "How long will that take?" 3, maybe 4 days. "Reeves won't wait that long," Sam said. Marshal Daniels's expression hardened. "Reeves is a bounty hunter, not a lawman. If he tries to take Mrs. Neshoba without a legal warrant, he'll answer to me. I'll send word that she's under my protection during the investigation." It was something. Not much, but something. Sam looked at Neshoba, trying to gauge her reaction. Her face was unreadable, but Lily had moved closer to her mother, sensing the tension. The door to the marshal's office opened without warning. A man strode in, well-dressed in expensive clothes more suited to San Francisco than Arizona. He was perhaps 48 years old, with silver at his temples and the confident bearing of someone who expected doors to open and people to step aside. Clayton Whitmore had arrived. Behind him came Sheriff Tom Bradley, a shorter, rounder man with nervous eyes and a badge that hung crooked on his vest. Bradley looked uncomfortable, as if he would rather be anywhere else. Whitmore's gaze swept the room and settled on Neshoba with cold satisfaction. "Marshal Daniels, I demand you arrest that woman immediately. She is a murderer and an arsonist, and I have 3 sworn statements testifying to her crimes." Marshal Daniels stood slowly, his face neutral. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm conducting an investigation into the allegations. Until I complete that investigation, I'm not arresting anyone." "An investigation?" Whitmore's voice dripped contempt. "Into what I have witnesses. I have evidence. What more do you need?" "I need to hear from witnesses who don't work for you," Daniels said calmly. "I need to understand why a woman with a young daughter would risk everything to murder a man she had no quarrel with and burn down a building for no apparent reason." Whitmore turned his attention to Sam. "And who are you?" "Samuel Mackenzie. I own the ranch at Mackenzie Creek." "Ah, yes, Mackenzie. I've heard of you. The man who married a half-breed and then buried her. Now you're taking up with another one." His tone made it clear what he thought of such choices. Sam felt his hands curl into fists. Doc Fletcher put a warning hand on his arm. Neshoba's face remained impassive, but her eyes burned with quiet rage. "Watch your words, Whitmore," Sam said softly. "You're talking about someone's wife, someone's mother. Show some respect." Whitmore laughed. "Respect for a savage? You're more fool than I thought, Mackenzie. And you're harboring a criminal. Sheriff Bradley arrest Mackenzie as well, aiding and abetting a fugitive." Sheriff Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Whitmore, maybe we should wait for the marshal's investigation." "I'm not asking Bradley. I'm telling. Do your job or I'll find someone who will." Marshal Daniels stepped between them. "Sheriff Bradley has no jurisdiction inside Fort Apache. This is federal territory and I'm the law here. Now, Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you leave my office and let me do my work." For a moment Whitmore's mask slipped. Sam saw the man beneath ruthless and cold, someone who was used to getting his way and did not take kindly to being crossed. But Whitmore was also smart enough to know when to retreat. Very well, Marshal, conduct your investigation. But I'm going to the territorial court. I'll have a federal warrant within a week. When that happens, not even you can protect her. He looked at Neshoba. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts, woman. It won't be long. He turned and walked out. Sheriff Bradley hurried after him, throwing an apologetic look back at the marshal. Silence filled the office after they left. Lily had pressed herself against her mother's side, frightened by the angry voices. Neshoba stood straight and tall, but Sam could see her hands trembling slightly. That man, Neshoba said quietly, wants more than justice. He wants our land. The silver deposits, Sam said, understanding suddenly. That's what this is really about. Marshal Daniels nodded. There are rumors of major silver veins running through the Apache reservation. If Whitmore can get the Apache removed legally or otherwise, he can claim those lands for mining. Accusing you of murder and arson is just a way to justify pushing your people out. Then we need proof, Sam said. Proof that he's lying. Proof that his witnesses are lying. Proof that he's the real criminal here. That's easier said than done, Doc Fletcher said. Whitmore covers his tracks. Always has. Sam looked at Neshoba, then at Lily, who gazed up at him with those enormous, trusting eyes. He thought about the promise he had made, the bond that had been spoken over him, the covenant he had accepted without fully understanding it. Then we'll find a way, Sam said. Because that's what family does. We stand together. Neshoba looked at him for a long moment, and something passed between them. An understanding. A shared determination. They were no longer strangers bound by circumstance. They were allies fighting for the same cause, protecting the same child, standing against the same darkness. Outside the marshal's office, the afternoon sun beat down without mercy. Sam, Neshoba, and Lily walked back toward where they had left the wagon. Maria Santos was waiting there, along with someone Sam had not expected to see. Young Bear had returned, and with him were two other Apache warriors. They stood beside Maria's wagon, alert and ready. When Young Bear saw Neshoba, relief crossed his face. Red Sky Walker sent us, Young Bear explained. He said if the white man's law will not protect you, then we will. Neshoba spoke to him rapidly in Apache. Young Bear listened, then nodded and replied. The exchange was too fast for Sam to follow, but he caught the tone. Planning, strategy. These were people preparing for war, not with weapons alone, but with intelligence and unity. Maria Santos approached Sam quietly. Mr. Mackenzie, I heard things in the store. Bad things. Whitmore is gathering men. Hired guns, 20 or more. He says you and the Apache woman attacked him. That's a lie, Sam said. Of course it's a lie, but lies told by rich men have a way of becoming truth, especially when they're backed up by guns. She paused. There's something else. A man named Pete who used to tend bar at the saloon in Red Rock. He's retired now, lives quiet, but he was working the night McAllister died. He saw everything. Sam's pulse quickened. Will he testify? He's afraid. Whitmore threatened him after it happened, told him to keep his mouth shut or end up like McAllister. But Pete's a decent man. He's been carrying the guilt. Maybe if you approach him right, if you can guarantee his safety, he'll tell the truth. It was a thread. Thin, fragile, but a thread nonetheless. Sam looked at Marshal Daniels, who had followed them outside. Marshal, if we can get a witness, a real witness who saw what actually happened that night, would that be enough? It would be a start, Daniels said. But Whitmore has resources. He'll fight back hard. Let him fight, Neshoba said. Her voice was quiet but fierce. I will not run. I will not let my daughter grow up believing her mother was a coward or a killer. We stand. We fight with truth. And if truth is not enough, then we fight with whatever is necessary. Sam found himself nodding. Yes, that was exactly right. They made plans quickly. Sam would ride to Red Rock tomorrow with Young Bear, find Pete, convince him to come forward. Doc Fletcher would continue asking questions at the fort, looking for inconsistencies in Whitmore's story. Marshal Daniels would buy them time however he could. As the sun began to set, turning the sky deep orange and purple, Sam prepared the wagon for the journey back to his ranch. Neshoba and Lily would stay with him under his protection until this was resolved one way or another. On the ride home, Lily fell asleep in the back of the wagon, exhausted by the day's tension. Neshoba sat beside Sam on the driving bench, silent for a long time. Finally she spoke. "Why do you do this, Sam Mackenzie? You could give us to Whitmore. Save yourself trouble. Save your life, maybe. Why do you risk everything?" Sam was quiet for a moment, watching the road ahead, feeling the reins in his hands, thinking about the question. Why, indeed, he could have walked away, could have let the law, corrupt as it was, take its course, could have stayed safe in his solitude. But that was not really living. That was just surviving. And he had been just surviving for 4 long years. "When my wife died," he said slowly, "I was alone. No one came. No one helped. I buried her and our baby by myself, and I promised I'd never care about anyone again, because caring just meant more pain. But you know what I learned today?" "What?" "I learned that being alone hurts more than caring does. And I learned that some things are worth fighting for even when you're scared, especially when you're scared." He glanced at her. "You and Lily, you've reminded me that I'm still alive. Not just breathing, but alive. And that's a gift I can't repay." Neshoba was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "You gave my child a future. Now you give me hope. That is a debt I cannot repay either." "Then we're even," Sam said with a small smile. "No," Neshoba said. "We are family. That is different. That is more." They rode on through the gathering darkness toward Mackenzie Creek, toward home. Behind them the lights of Fort Apache faded. Ahead, stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, countless and eternal. And somewhere in the night, Clayton Whitmore sat in Sheriff Bradley's office, plotting his next move, gathering his forces, preparing to crush anyone who stood in his way. The storm was coming. But for the first time in years, Sam Mackenzie was not facing it alone. And that made all the difference. The morning after their return from Fort Apache brought a tension to Mackenzie Creek that hung in the air like the promise of rain that never came. Sam stood in his small barn, checking his saddle and gear, preparing for the ride to Red Rock. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, but his mind was elsewhere, turning over possibilities and dangers like river stones. Young Bear appeared in the doorway, silent as a shadow. The young warrior had stayed the night sleeping outside beneath the stars, as was his preference. Now he watched Sam with those dark, assessing eyes that seemed to see more than most men. "You are worried," young Bear said. It was not a question. "A man would be a fool not to be worried," Sam replied. "We're riding into Red Rock to find a witness who's been too scared to speak for weeks. Whitmore owns that town. His men will be watching. Then we do not ride in like thunder. We move like smoke, quiet, careful." Young Bear stepped into the barn, running his hand along Sam's horse's neck with the easy confidence of someone who understood animals. "You were soldier in the big war between white men, yes. Yes, long time ago now. Then you know, sometimes the quietest approach is the deadest." Young Bear smiled slightly at his own pun on the word. Most dead. English is strange language. Despite everything, Sam found himself smiling. Deadliest. And yes, you're right. We go in quiet, find Pete, convince him to come with us, and get out before Whitmore even knows we were there. And if we cannot leave quietly, Sam checked his Winchester, making sure it was loaded, then we leave quickly instead. Inside the cabin, Neshoba was braiding Lily's hair, her fingers moving with the kind of practiced tenderness that comes from years of morning rituals. The girl sat patiently, though her eyes kept drifting to where Sam was preparing to leave. "Ba Sam," Lily said, using the name she had given him, a mix of Apache and English that meant something like father, uncle, protector, all rolled into one. "You will be careful, yes?" Sam knelt down so he was at her eye level. Yes, little one. I'll be very careful. And young Bear will be with me. He's the most careful person I know. Young Bear says he is the most dangerous person you know, Lily corrected seriously. Sam laughed. He's probably both. Neshoba's hands paused in their work. She looked at Sam with an expression he was learning to read, concern mixed with something deeper, something that made his chest feel tight. This man Pete, he may not agree to help. Whitmore has made him very afraid. I know, but Maria says he's been carrying the guilt. Sometimes guilt is heavier than fear. If I can remind him of that, maybe he'll find his courage. And if he does not, Sam stood settling his hat on his head, then we find another way. There's always another way. But even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. Whitmore had money-power witnesses who would say whatever he paid them to say. What did they have? The truth. And in Sam's experience, truth was often the weakest weapon of all, crushed beneath the weight of gold and guns. Neshoba walked outside with him. The sun was climbing higher now, burning away the cool morning air. In a few hours the heat would be brutal. They needed to reach Red Rock by midday before the afternoon sun made travel dangerous. Young Bear had already brought the horses around. Sam's gelding and a smaller paint horse that Young Bear had arrived on, a beautiful animal with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition despite the warrior's fierce appearance. As Sam prepared to mount, Neshoba reached out and touched his arm. The gesture was brief, but it stopped him completely. Physical touch between them had been rare, careful, always conscious of boundaries and propriety. This simple touch felt significant. "Come back," she said quietly. "Lily needs you. I need you." The last three words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sam looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the fierce Apache warrior woman to the person beneath, someone who had lost as much as he had, someone who had learned to survive but was now learning slowly to hope again. "I'll come back," he promised. "That's not a maybe, that's a fact." She nodded once, then stepped back. Sam mounted his horse, and he and Young Bear rode out, leaving Mackenzie Creek behind. At the edge of the property, Sam turned in his saddle for one last look. Neshoba stood in front of the cabin with Lily beside her, both of them watching. He raised his hand in farewell, and Lily waved back enthusiastically, her small arm moving back and forth in a wide arc. Then Sam turned forward and focused on the road ahead. They rode in silence for the first hour, keeping a steady pace that covered ground without exhausting the horses. The land around them was typical Arizona territory, all dust and sage and scattered mesquite, with the mountains rising in the distance like ancient witnesses to all the foolishness men engaged in below. Finally, Young Bear spoke. "You care for Neshoba?" It was a statement, not a question, but Sam answered anyway. "Yes. I care for both of them. As family, or as something more?" Sam was quiet for a moment, considering. "I don't know yet. Maybe I don't have the right to think about something more. It's only been days since we met." "My people have a saying," Young Bear said. "The soul knows what the mind has not yet learned. Your soul knows already. You are just waiting for your mind to catch up." He glanced at Sam with a slight smile. "Also, the way she looks at you is not the way a woman looks at a brother or a friend. It is the way a woman looks at a man she is beginning to trust with her heart, which is different and more dangerous than trusting with her life." Sam did not know what to say to that. The idea that Neshoba might feel something beyond gratitude or alliance, that she might be developing feelings as complicated and confusing as his own, was both terrifying and strangely wonderful. They rode on, and as the sun climbed higher, the heat became oppressive. They stopped once at a small creek to water the horses and refill their canteens. Young Bear scouted ahead while Sam waited, checking for any signs of Whitmore's men or Reeves, but the land seemed empty, holding its breath. Red Rock appeared on the horizon just after noon, shimmering in the heat like a mirage that had decided to become real. It was a small town, maybe 200 people, built around a crossroads and sustained by ranchers, miners, and the occasional traveler passing through on the way to somewhere more important. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with wooden buildings that had been baked gray by years of sun. They approached carefully, not riding straight down the main street, but circling around to enter from the south side, less visible. Maria Santos had told Sam that Pete lived in a small house behind the old livery stable, retired now and keeping to himself. They found the place easily enough. It was a modest structure, little more than a shack really, but neatly kept with a small garden struggling to survive in the Arizona heat. Sam dismounted and approached the door while young Bear stayed with the horses, alert and watchful. Sam knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Pete, my name is Samuel Mackenzie. Maria Santos sent me. I need to talk to you about the night McAllister died." Silence. Then finally a voice from inside, old and tired and frightened. "Go away. I don't know nothing." "I think you know everything," Sam said gently. "I think you've been carrying it around for weeks and it's eating you alive. I think you want to tell the truth, but you're scared. And I understand that. Clayton Whitmore is a powerful man. But Pete, there's a woman and a little girl who are going to die if someone doesn't speak up. And I don't think you want that on your conscience, too." More silence. Sam waited, giving the old man time. Finally the door opened a crack. An eye peered out, roomy and suspicious. "Who are you again?" "Samuel Mackenzie. I'm nobody important. Just a rancher trying to do the right thing." "The right thing gets you killed out here." "Maybe. But the wrong thing kills you from the inside. I've seen it happen." The door opened wider. Pete was perhaps 70 years old, thin as a rail, with white hair and hands that trembled slightly. He looked at Sam, then past him to where young Bear stood with the horses. "You brought an Apache with you." "I brought a friend. His name is Young Bear. He's protecting the woman Whitmore is trying to murder. The woman you know didn't kill McAllister." Pete's face crumpled. He looked like he might cry. "I saw it all. I was right there. What really happened that night. It wasn't anything like what Whitmore's been saying." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Cole killed McAllister. Cold blood. Then Whitmore covered it up and blamed your woman." "Will you testify?" Sam asked. "Will you tell Marshal Daniels what you saw?" Pete's hands shook harder. "If I do, Whitmore will kill me. If you don't, Neshoba dies, and her 7-year-old daughter grows up without a mother. Can you live with that?" The old man sank down onto a chair inside his small home, his face in his hands. Sam waited, not pushing, just letting the weight of conscience do its work. Finally, Pete looked up. "I'm already dying," he said quietly. "Doc says I got maybe a year, maybe less. Something in my lungs from all the smoke and whiskey over the years. I was thinking I'd just wait it out, die quiet, not make no trouble. But you're right. If I let that woman hang for something she didn't do, if I let that little girl lose her mama, then I'm already dead inside. Might as well die standing up instead of lying down." Relief flooded through Sam. "Thank you, Pete. You're a brave man." "No," Pete said with a sad smile. "I'm a coward who's finally found his courage. That's different." They made plans quickly. Pete would pack a few things and ride back with them to Fort Apache, where Marshal Daniels could take his official statement and guarantee his protection. It would take Clayton Whitmore time to get a federal warrant, and in that time, with Pete's testimony, the marshal might be able to build a real case. Pete disappeared into the back of his small house to gather his belongings. Sam stepped outside to brief young Bear. The warrior nodded approvingly. "You are good at talking. You make the old man remember his honor. That is a useful skill." "Let's hope it's useful enough," Sam said. They were loading Pete's few possessions onto a third horse, an old mare the bartender kept in a small corral behind his house, when the sound of hoofbeats made them all freeze. Multiple riders coming fast from the direction of town. Young Bear moved like lightning, pulling his bow and knocking an arrow in one fluid motion. Sam grabbed his Winchester. Pete went pale as bone. 6 riders rounded the corner and pulled up hard when they saw the group. Not Reeves this time. These were Whitmore's men, hired guns with hard eyes and ready weapons. The leader was a man Sam recognized from Fort Apache, someone called Cole, the same man Pete had just identified as McAllister's real killer. Cole's hand was already on his pistol. "Well now, Pete, didn't expect to find you packing up. Going somewhere?" "Just visiting family," Pete said, his voice barely steady. "That's so, and these gentlemen are your family, and Apache and Mackenzie the Indian lover." Cole's smile was cold as winter. "Mr. Whitmore figured someone might come talking to you. Told me to keep an eye on things. Guess he was right." Sam kept his rifle ready but not quite aimed. "Not yet." "We're just leaving Cole. No trouble here." "Oh, there's trouble," Cole said. "Question is whether it's the kind that ends with everybody walking away or the kind that ends with blood in the dust. See, Mr. Whitmore can't have old Pete here spreading lies about what happened to McAllister. Bad for business." "They're not lies," Pete said suddenly, and Sam heard something shift in the old man's voice, backbone appearing after years of being bent. "You killed McAllister Cole. I saw you do it. Stabbed him over a card debt and walked away laughing." Cole's face hardened. "Old man, you just signed your death warrant." Everything happened at once. Cole drew his pistol. Young Bear released his arrow. Sam brought up the Winchester and fired. The other riders went for their guns. Young Bear's arrow took Cole in the shoulder, spinning him back in his saddle. Sam's shot hit another man's horse, sending it rearing and throwing its rider. The gunfight that followed was brief, brutal, and loud. Sam fired 3 more times, aiming for horses and dirt, trying to scatter the men without killing anyone if possible. Young Bear moved like water, already knocking another arrow while taking cover behind Pete's house. Pete had dropped flat to the ground, covering his head, but they were outnumbered and in the open. One of Whitmore's men got a shot off that kicked up splinters from the wall inches from Sam's head. Another rider circled around trying to flank them. This was going bad fast. Then from behind Whitmore's men 2 more arrows appeared as if from nowhere. One took a rider's hat clean off his head. The other buried itself in another man's saddle. The riders spun confused, trying to figure out where the new attack was coming from. 3 Apache warriors emerged from positions around the perimeter of Pete's property. They had been there all along, invisible, waiting. Now they showed themselves, bows drawn, arrows ready. The message was clear. 6 to 6. Even odds. And behind them impossibly came Maria Santos in her wagon, pulling up with the kind of timing that suggested she had been following all along. She stood up in her seat holding an old shotgun that looked like it had been in her family since before the war. "Gentlemen," she called out in her accented English, "I am a witness to everything happening here. 6 men attacking 3. You start shooting for real, and I will testify you were murderers. I am a respected business owner. People will believe me." Cole, still clutching his wounded shoulder, looked around at the situation. His men were nervous now, outflanked, facing warriors who had appeared from nowhere, and an old woman with a shotgun who had no fear in her eyes. "This ain't over," Cole snarled. "Whitmore will hear about this." "I expect he will," Sam said calmly. "And when he does, you tell him Samuel Mackenzie has a witness. A real witness who saw what really happened. And that witness is under the protection of Marshal Daniels now. So whatever Whitmore's planning, he better think twice." Cole jerked his horse around and rode off, his men following, leaving dust and defeat in their wake. As soon as they were out of sight, Sam let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Pete climbed to his feet, shaking but alive. The Apache warriors melted back into the landscape as quietly as they had appeared, except for one who approached Young Bear and spoke rapidly in their language. Young Bear listened, nodded, then turned to Sam. "Red Sky Walker sent them to follow us. He said he did not trust the white man's town to be safe. He was right." "Thank him for me," Sam said. "Thank all of them." Maria Santos climbed down from her wagon, still holding her shotgun. "Mr. Mackenzie, you attract excitement wherever you go. I was just coming to buy supplies, and I find a war in my friend Pete's yard." "Maria," Sam said, "how did you know to be here?" She smiled mysteriously. "I am an old woman. Old women know things. Also, I saw Cole and his men riding this way earlier and thought it might be trouble. I have a talent for smelling trouble before it arrives." They did not linger. With Pete mounted on his old mare and the Apache warriors providing an invisible escort, they made their way out of Red Rock and onto the road back to Fort Apache. Behind them, Sam could imagine Cole rushing to Whitmore with the news. The fight had just escalated. Whitmore would not take this lightly, but they had Pete. They had a witness. And sometimes, one honest voice was enough to drown out 1,000 paid lies. As they rode, Pete moved his horse closer to Sam's. "Thank you," the old man said, "for reminding me what it feels like to stand up. Been a long time since I felt like a man instead of a coward." "You were never a coward," Sam said. "Just scared. There's a difference." "Maybe. But I'm done being scared. Whatever time I got left, I'm going to spend it telling the truth. Feels good. Feels right." They reached Fort Apache just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Marshal Daniels was waiting, having been alerted by one of the Apache scouts. He took Pete's statement personally, writing down every word with careful precision. When it was done, Daniels looked at Sam with something like respect. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Mackenzie. Probably both. But you got me a witness. That changes everything." "Will it be enough?" Sam asked. "It's a start. Whitmore still has power, still has money, but money can't buy back a man's conscience once he's decided to speak the truth. Pete's testimony casts doubt on everything Whitmore has claimed. That doubt might be enough to keep Neshoba alive long enough for me to investigate the warehouse fire, too. I'm betting that's another lie, and if I can prove it, Whitmore's whole case falls apart." "How long do we have?" 3 days, maybe 4, before Whitmore's federal warrant comes through. In that time, I need to find more evidence, and you need to keep Neshoba and Lily safe." Sam nodded. It was not much, but it was more than they had that morning. Sometimes you had to measure victory in inches, not miles. The ride back to Mackenzie Creek felt longer than the ride out. Sam was exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from tension finally released. Beside him, Young Bear rode in comfortable silence, alert but relaxed. Behind them, the Apache warriors who had saved their lives had already disappeared, returning to their own camps to report to Red Sky Walker. Night had fully fallen by the time they reached the ranch. Lamplight glowed in the cabin windows, warm and welcoming. As Sam dismounted, the door opened and Neshoba stepped out. She had been waiting, watching. Their eyes met across the yard, and Sam saw relief flood her face. Without thinking about it, without planning it, he walked straight to her. She met him halfway, and for just a moment, just a single heartbeat, her hand touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat, confirming he was real and whole and alive. "We got him," Sam said quietly. Pete agreed to testify. "It's not over, but it's a start." Neshoba's eyes closed briefly, and her shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Whitmore's not going to take this lying down. Things are going to get worse before they get better." "Then we face the worst together," Neshoba said simply. "As family faces all things, together." Inside the cabin, Lily was already asleep, curled up on the bed with Sam's coat still draped over her as a blanket. Sam looked at the small girl at Neshoba standing beside him at the life that had somehow appeared in his empty home, and felt something he had not felt in 4 long years. He felt like he had something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, something worth possibly dying for if it came to that. And in the flickering lamplight, with danger gathering like storm clouds on the horizon, that feeling was enough to push back the darkness. At least for tonight. The morning after their return from Red Rock dawned gray and sullen, as if the sky itself sensed the storm gathering on the horizon. Sam stood on his porch, watching the land wake slowly, his coffee growing cold in his hand. He had slept poorly, plagued by dreams of fire and blood, of Lily's face as she watched her mother being dragged away, of Neshoba's eyes accusing him of failure. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Neshoba emerged, already dressed, her hair freshly braided. She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence in the cool morning air. "You did not sleep," she said. It was not a question. Not much, Sam admitted. Keep thinking about all the ways this can go wrong. Then stop thinking and start planning. Worry is prayer for things you do not want. My grandmother taught me that. Sam smiled despite himself. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She was also a woman who survived 3 wars, 2 famines, and 5 husbands. She knew something about facing bad times. Neshoba looked out at the land, her expression thoughtful. What comes next? Marshal Daniels has 3, maybe 4 days to investigate before Whitmore's federal warrant arrives. In that time, we need to stay alive and stay free. After that, I don't know. After that, we make new plans. But first, we survive today. She turned to face him fully. Sam, I need to say something. You have risked your life, your home, your peace. You have done more for us than any person has right to ask of another. If you want us to leave, if you want to step back from this fight, I will understand. Lily and I can go to the mountains, hide with Red Skywalker and the others. You do not have to carry this burden. Sam looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the strength in her face, but also the vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide. He set down his coffee cup and turned to face her completely. When I pulled Lily out of that river, he said slowly, choosing his words with care, something changed in me. Something I thought was dead came back to life. I don't know what to call it. Hope, maybe. Or purpose. Or just the simple feeling that I matter, that what I do makes a difference. He paused. You and Lily, you've given me that. You've reminded me what it feels like to be human instead of just existing. So no, I'm not stepping back. I'm stepping forward. All the way forward. Whatever comes. Neshoba's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She nodded once, sharp and decisive, then did something that surprised them both. She reached out and took his hand, holding it firmly, her calloused fingers intertwining with his. Then we stand together, she said. Until the end, whatever that end may be. They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, looking out at the land that was becoming theirs, together a shared territory of hope and danger. Then Lily's voice called from inside, bright and innocent, asking about breakfast, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, something that could not be unshifted. The day passed in tense preparation. Young Bear arrived with 2 other warriors sent by Red Skywalker to help fortify the ranch. They worked together. Apache and White Man side by side, reinforcing the cabin's defenses, setting up positions that would provide cover if shooting started, planning escape routes if retreat became necessary. Sam was impressed by the efficiency of it all. The Apache warriors moved with practiced skill, seeing vulnerabilities he had missed, suggesting improvements he would not have thought of. They did not do this with words, but with actions demonstrating and building, creating a fortress out of what had been just a simple ranch house. By mid-afternoon, Doc Fletcher arrived in his wagon, his face grave. He climbed down slowly like a man carrying bad news, and Sam knew before the doctor spoke that something had happened. Sam, Neshoba, we need to talk. Inside. They gathered around the small table, Lily playing outside under Young Bear's watchful eye. Doc Fletcher pulled papers from his medical bag, spreading them out carefully. Marshal Daniels sent me. He's uncovered something, but it's not good news. Doc pointed to the papers. These are telegrams from the territorial court. Whitmore didn't just file for a warrant. He's gotten a judge in Tucson to declare this an Apache uprising. He's claiming that Neshoba's tribe is preparing for war, that they've been stockpiling weapons, that the murder of McAllister was the first act of aggression. That's insane, Sam said. Red Skywalker's people have been peaceful for years. It doesn't matter if it's true, Doc said wearily. It matters that a judge signed an order. Federal troops are being mobilized from Fort Huachuca. They'll be here in 3 days. When they arrive, they have orders to arrest any Apache not on the reservation and to search for weapons caches. Neshoba's face had gone very still, very calm. It was the kind of calm that comes before violence. They are creating an excuse for war. Whitmore will get his land one way or another. Either I hang for murder or my people are driven out by soldiers. Either way, he wins." "Not if we can prove he's lying," Sam said. "Doc, what about the warehouse fire? Did Daniels find anything?" "He's still investigating, but so far nothing concrete. The warehouse burned 3 weeks ago. Any evidence went up in smoke. Whitmore's claiming Neshoba did it to destroy his supply records, but without physical evidence, it's her word against his witnesses." "His paid witnesses," Sam corrected. "Yes, but paid or not, they'll testify. And in a territorial court, their word carries more weight than an Apache woman's denial." Doc Fletcher rubbed his tired eyes. "I'm sorry. I wish I had better news." "What about Pete's testimony?" Sam asked. "Doesn't that count for something?" "It does. It creates reasonable doubt about the murder charge. But it doesn't address the arson, and it doesn't stop the federal order about the uprising. Whitmore has covered his bases. He's attacking from multiple directions at once, making sure that even if we stop one charge, another one will stick." Sam stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. He walked to the window, staring out at the land he had thought was his sanctuary, the place he had come to hide from the world. But the world had found him anyway. It always did. "Then we need to get evidence," he said. "Real evidence that Whitmore is behind all of this. Something even a corrupt judge can't ignore." "How?" Doc asked. "The man covers his tracks. Always has. Then we make him uncover them. We force his hand. We make him so angry, so desperate that he makes a mistake." Neshoba stood and moved to stand beside Sam at the window. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Whitmore's weakness is his greed. He wants the silver on your land so badly he can taste it. What if we make him think he's about to lose it? What if we threaten the one thing he cares about more than anything else, his money?" Doc Fletcher frowned. "I'm not following." Sam turned from the window, an idea forming dangerous and half crazy, but possibly, just possibly, workable. "Whitmore keeps records. Business records, correspondence contracts. They'll be in his office in Red Rock. If we could get those records, show that he's been planning this land grab for months, planning to force the Apache out before the murder even happened, it would prove everything is a setup." "You're talking about breaking into his office," Doc said flatly. "That's suicide. After what happened with Pete, he'll have guards everywhere." "Maybe not everywhere," Sam said. "What if we create a distraction? Something big enough to pull his men away, give us a window to get in and out." Young Bear, who had been listening from the doorway, spoke up. "What kind of distraction?" "The kind that makes Whitmore think his precious mine is under attack. I've seen the survey maps at the land office. His main operation is 10 miles north of Red Rock up in the foothills. What if someone, say a group of Apache warriors, was spotted near that mine? Whitmore would send every man he has to protect it. While his men are there, we slip into his office in town." "That is a large risk," Young Bear said. "If we are caught near the mine, the army will use it as proof of uprising. It gives Whitmore exactly what he wants." "Not if we're careful. Not if we're only seen from a distance, just enough to draw them out, but not enough to actually engage. You disappear into the mountains before they can catch you. You've done it 100 times before." Young Bear considered this, then nodded slowly. "It could work. But someone would need to be at the mine to coordinate the timing. Someone would need to make sure Whitmore's men actually leave Red Rock before you enter his office." "I'll do it," Doc Fletcher said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. The old doctor smiled grimly. "I'm the only one who can move freely without suspicion. I'll say I'm making rounds to the mining camps, checking on injured workers. I can signal when the men leave, give you the all clear." "Henry, you could lose your license for this," Sam said. "You could go to prison." "I could also live with myself," Doc replied. "I've stood by and watched good people suffer at the hands of men like Whitmore for too long. It's time I did something about it. Besides, I'm 60 years old. What are they going to do? Send me to prison? I'll probably die of old age before the trial ends." Neshoba had been quiet through all of this, but now she spoke. "I will go with you to Whitmore's office." "No," Sam said immediately. Too dangerous. This is my fight. I will not sit and wait like a helpless child while men decide my fate. You have a daughter who needs you alive. Which is exactly why I must fight. What kind of mother teaches her child to hide instead of stand? What kind of woman am I if I let others risk their lives while I do nothing? Her voice was calm, but absolutely unyielding. I am going, Sam. You cannot stop me. Do not waste time trying. Sam looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, and knew she was right. This was her battle more than anyone's. She had every right to be part of it. More than that, she had the right to fight for herself, to be active instead of passive, to be a warrior instead of a victim. All right, he said finally. We go together. Young Bear, can you organize the distraction at the mine? Yes, Red Sky Walker will approve. We are already being accused of uprising. We might as well use that accusation to our advantage. They spent the rest of the day planning every detail. Timing would be crucial. Doc Fletcher would ride to the mining camp tomorrow morning, establishing his presence as normal. The next night after dark, Young Bear and 5 warriors would position themselves near Whitmore's mine, starting small fires, making noise, being seen just enough to cause alarm. When Whitmore's men rode out from Red Rock to investigate, Doc would signal using a lantern 3 flashes visible from the hills. That would be Sam and Neshoba's cue to enter town from the south side, break into Whitmore's office, take whatever documents they could find, and get out before the men returned. It was not a perfect plan. There were a dozen ways it could go wrong, but it was the only plan they had. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of crimson and gold, Sam found himself alone with Neshoba behind the cabin. Lily was inside, being entertained by Young Bear, who was teaching her a children's game from his youth. Their laughter drifted through the open window, incongruously light against the weight of what was coming. "Are you afraid?" Neshoba asked quietly. Sam considered lying, then decided she deserved honesty. "Yes, terrified, actually." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp, makes you careful. My husband used to say that the warrior who feels no fear is the warrior who dies first because he forgets to watch for danger. Your husband was a smart man." "He was. But he also died too young, too violently, for nothing." She turned to face Sam. "I do not want Lily to grow up like I did, always afraid, always running, always losing the people she loves. This ends now. One way or another we make a stand. We create a place where she can be safe, where she can grow up knowing that sometimes justice actually wins. And if it doesn't, if we fail, then at least we will fail, standing up, fighting back, refusing to accept the world as Whitmore wants to make it. That is worth something. That is worth everything." Sam reached out and took her hand again the way he had that morning. This time she squeezed back her grip, strong and sure. "When this is over," Sam said carefully, "if we survive, if we win, I want to talk about the future, about what happens next, about whether you and Lily might consider staying here, not just for safety, but because, well, because this place feels right with you in it, both of you." Neshoba looked up at him, and in the fading light her face was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional beauty, and everything to do with strength and courage and the kind of spirit that refused to be broken. "I would like that conversation," she said softly. "I would like it very much." They stood together in the gathering darkness, 2 people who had lost everything and somehow found each other, preparing to risk it all one more time. Inside the cabin, Lily's laughter rang out, innocent and pure, a reminder of what they were fighting for. Tomorrow the plan would begin. Tomorrow they would put themselves in the path of danger, gambling everything on the hope that truth could triumph over money and power. Tomorrow they might die. But tonight, standing hand in hand in the Arizona twilight, they were alive. They were together. And they were ready to fight for something worth keeping. The night deepened around them, stars emerging one by one in the vast desert sky. Somewhere out there, Clayton Whitmore was plotting, scheming, preparing his own moves. Somewhere out there, Reeves was watching and waiting. Somewhere out there, federal troops were preparing to march. But here at Mackenzie Creek, a different kind of army was forming. Not one built on violence or greed or hatred, but one built on honor, family, and the stubborn refusal to let evil win without a fight. Sam looked at the woman beside him at the cabin behind them, where a child slept safely at the land spreading out in all directions. He thought about his wife, about the child he had lost, about the 4 years he had spent just surviving instead of living. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For reminding me what I'm capable of. For showing me that caring about someone is not weakness. For giving me a reason to wake up tomorrow and fight instead of just endure." Neshoba leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection that felt more intimate than any kiss. "You saved my daughter's life. I think we are even." "No," Sam said with a small smile. "You saved mine. Lily just happened to be the way you did it." They stood like that until full darkness had fallen, and the cold night air drove them inside where the fire burned warm, and Lily slept peacefully, and young Bear kept watch, silent and vigilant. Tomorrow would bring danger. Tomorrow would bring the test. But tonight they had each other, and in the harsh Arizona territory that was a kind of wealth that Clayton Whitmore, with all his money and power, could never understand and would never possess. The cabin door closed behind them, shutting out the night. Inside, the lamp burned steady and bright, a small point of light in a world that sometimes seemed determined to be dark. But light was stubborn. Light had a way of surviving. And sometimes when people stood together and refused to let it be extinguished, light could even push back the darkness and make room for hope to grow. Tomorrow they would find out if hope was enough. Tonight they held on to it with both hands and did not let go. The night they chose for the operation was moonless and black, the kind of darkness that felt alive, pressing against the skin like a physical thing. Sam and Neshoba rode in silence toward Red Rock, their horses picking their way carefully along the trail. Behind them, Mackenzie Creek receded into the distance where Lily slept under the protection of 2 Apache warriors Red Sky Walker had sent. The girl had cried when Neshoba left, clinging to her mother with desperate hands, and Sam had seen something break in Neshoba's eyes before she gently pried those small fingers loose and promised to return. Now they rode through darkness toward a town that wanted them dead, trusting in a plan that depended on perfect timing and more than a little luck. Sam kept his eyes on the horizon, watching for the signal from Doc Fletcher. 3 flashes of lantern light. That was all they needed to see. 3 flashes, and they would know Whitmore's men had taken the bait and ridden north to the mine. Beside him, Neshoba sat her horse with the easy grace of someone born to ride. She had changed her clothes, wearing dark colors that would blend into shadow, her hair tied back severely. She looked like what she was, a warrior preparing for battle. But Sam could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand kept drifting to the knife at her belt, checking and rechecking that it was there. "Tell me about Lily's father," Sam said quietly, partly to pass the time, partly because he wanted to know, to understand the man who had loved this woman before him. Neshoba was silent for so long, Sam thought she would not answer. Then she spoke, her voice soft and distant. "His name was Neol. It means wind in our language. He was like the wind, always moving, always free. He made me laugh. That is what I remember most. In a world that was hard and cruel, he found ways to make me laugh." She paused. "He was hunting deer when the bounty hunter found him. The man said later he thought Neol was someone else, someone with a price on his head. He shot him in the back. Neol was dead before he hit the ground. The bounty hunter got $50 for bringing in the body even though it was the wrong man. $50. That is what my husband's life was worth to them." Sam felt rage settle cold and heavy in his chest. "I'm sorry. Sorry does not bring him back. Sorry does not feed my daughter or keep her warm at night. Sorry is just a word white people say when they have done terrible things and want to feel better about themselves without actually changing anything." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Sam did not argue. What could he say? She was right. Sorry was inadequate. Sorry was nothing. "You're right," he said simply. Words don't mean much. Only actions do. So I'm not going to tell you I'm sorry anymore. I'm just going to keep acting like your life matters, like Lily's life matters, like the injustice done to Neol matters. And maybe someday that will be enough. Neshoba turned to look at him, and even in the darkness he could feel the weight of her gaze. You are a strange man, Sam Mackenzie. You see the world as it should be instead of as it is. That is either wisdom or foolishness. I have not decided which. Maybe it's both. Yes, she agreed. Maybe it is both. They crested a low hill and Red Rock appeared below them, a scatter of lights in the darkness like fallen stars. Sam pulled his horse to a stop, and Neshoba did the same. They sat together looking down at the town, waiting for the signal. Minutes crawled by. Sam's hands were sweating despite the cool night air. He wiped them on his pants, checking his weapons for the 10th time. His rifle was secured to his saddle. His pistol was loaded and ready. A small crowbar was tucked into his belt for forcing open Whitmore's office door if necessary. Everything was ready. Everything except his nerve, which felt like it might fail him at any moment. Then from the hills to the north, 3 points of light flashed in quick succession. Once. Twice. 3 times. Doc Fletcher's signal. Whitmore's men had spotted Young Bear and the Apache warriors near the mine. They were riding out to investigate. That's it, Sam whispered. We go now. They urged their horses forward, descending the hill and approaching Red Rock from the south side away from the main street. They left their horses tied in an alley behind the old livery stable where Pete had lived before he left for Fort Apache. The town was eerily quiet. Most of the buildings were dark. A few oil lamps burned in windows here and there, but the saloons were closed, the streets empty. Whitmore had pulled everyone together for the ride to the mine, just as they had hoped. Sam and Neshoba moved through shadows like ghosts, keeping to the alleys and back ways. Whitmore's office was on the 2nd floor of the bank building, accessed by an external staircase. They reached the bottom of those stairs and paused, listening. Nothing. No voices. No movement. Sam looked up at the dark windows above and felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Ready, he whispered. Neshoba nodded. Her hand found his in the darkness and squeezed once briefly. Then she released him and started up the stairs, moving with remarkable silence for someone climbing wooden steps. Sam followed, placing his feet carefully, avoiding the boards he could see were warped or loose. At the top they faced a heavy wooden door with a substantial lock. Sam pulled out the crowbar, fitting it into the gap between door and frame. He applied pressure slowly, carefully, trying to make as little noise as possible. The wood creaked. The lock groaned. Then, with a soft crack, the door swung open. They stepped inside. Sam pulled out a small oil lamp he had brought, keeping it shuttered to let out only a thin beam of light. The office was larger than he expected, filled with furniture that spoke of wealth and taste. A massive desk dominated the center of the room. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A safe stood in the corner, squat and imposing. You take the desk, Sam said quietly. I'll check the cabinets. They worked quickly, efficiently, pulling out papers and scanning them by lamplight. Most of it was routine business correspondence contracts for mining equipment, payroll records. But then Neshoba made a soft sound of discovery. Sam, look at this. He moved to the desk where she held up several documents. Even in the dim light, he could see they were important. Maps showing the Apache reservation with sections marked off. Letters between Whitmore and a territorial judge discussing how to legally remove the Apache from those marked lands. A contract dated 3 months before McAllister's murder, showing that Whitmore had already begun hiring men to intimidate and drive out Apache families. This proves he planned it all, Sam said, excitement rising in his chest. This proves the murder accusation was just part of a larger scheme. There's more, Neshoba said, rifling through another drawer. Bills of sale for weapons. He's been stockpiling rifles and ammunition, enough to arm a small army. He's planning a war, Sam realized. If the legal route doesn't work, if we somehow prove you innocent, he's going to start violence himself and blame it on the Apache, create his uprising from nothing. They gathered the documents quickly, stuffing them into a leather satchel Sam had brought. They were so focused on the papers that they almost missed the sound. Almost. But Neshoba's head snapped up, her body going rigid with alertness. Footsteps. On the stairs outside. Sam extinguished the lamp, instantly plunging them into darkness. They froze, listening. The footsteps came closer, stopped at the door. A key scraped in the lock, but the door was already open, the lock broken. A moment of silence. Then a man's voice, loud and alert. "Someone's in there. I can smell the lamp oil." More footsteps running now. Multiple people. They had been discovered. Somehow, despite all of their planning, they had been caught. Sam grabbed Neshoba's arm and pulled her toward the window on the opposite side of the room. It was their only chance. The footsteps were at the door now. Sam threw open the window and looked down. It was a 15-foot drop to the roof of a lower building. Dangerous, but possible. "Jump," he said. "I'll be right behind you." Neshoba did not hesitate. She climbed through the window and dropped, hitting the lower roof and rolling to absorb the impact. Sam threw the satchel down to her, then followed his boots, hitting the shingles hard enough to make them crack. Pain shot through his ankle, but there was no time to assess the damage. Behind them, men burst into Whitmore's office. A gunshot rang out, the bullet punching through the window frame where Sam had been seconds before. They were shooting now. No more pretense of law or justice, just murder. Sam and Neshoba ran across the lower roof to its edge, dropped again to the ground, this time into an alley. Sam's ankle screamed in protest, but adrenaline kept him moving. They ran through the darkness, heading for where they had left their horses. More gunshots, shouts. The town was waking up now, people emerging from buildings to see what the commotion was about. Sam and Neshoba burst into the alley where their horses waited. Sam practically threw Neshoba into her saddle, then mounted his own horse despite his injured ankle. They kicked their horses into a gallop, racing out of Red Rock with bullets following them into the night. They did not slow down for a mile, pushing their horses hard, putting distance between themselves and the chaos behind them. Finally, when the lights of Red Rock had disappeared entirely and no pursuit seemed to be following, Sam pulled his horse to a stop. His ankle was throbbing now, possibly sprained or broken. He could barely put weight on it. Neshoba dismounted and came to him immediately, seeing him favor the leg. "You are hurt." "Twisted it in the jump. I'll be fine." "Let me see." She helped him down from the horse, and he sat on a large rock while she carefully pulled off his boot and examined his ankle by feel in the darkness. Her hands were gentle but thorough, probing the swelling that was already forming. "Not broken," she said finally, "but badly sprained. You will need to rest it. No walking for several days." "We don't have several days. We need to get these documents to Marshal Daniels. We need to prove what Whitmore is planning before the federal troops arrive. Then I will ride to Fort Apache. You will stay here hidden until I return." "No, we stay together. Sam, you cannot ride at full speed with that ankle. If they chase us, if they catch up, you will slow us both down. I can make better time alone." She was right, and Sam hated it. But he also knew that being stubborn about this could get them both killed. He looked at the satchel of documents, then at Neshoba's determined face. "Go," he said finally. "But be careful. Trust no one except Daniels and Doc Fletcher. And Neshoba, when this is over, when you've delivered those papers and proven Whitmore's guilt, promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll come back. Not just to check on me or because you have to. Promise me you'll come back because you want to. Because what we have here, what's growing between us, it's real, and it's worth protecting just as much as Lily is." Neshoba knelt in front of him so they were at eye level. She reached up and touched his face, her calloused hand gentle against his cheek. "I promise," she said softly. "I promise I will come back. For you, for us, for the future we are going to build together when this nightmare ends." Then she kissed him. It was brief, just a press of lips, but it held everything they had not said, everything they were both too afraid to name. Hope, love, the terrifying possibility of happiness in a world that tried so hard to deny it to people like them. She pulled back, mounted her horse, took the satchel, and rode off into the darkness toward Fort Apache. Sam watched her go until he could no longer see her, until she was just the sound of hoofbeats fading into silence, until he was alone again with the night and his pain and the desperate hope that they had done enough, that the evidence would be sufficient, that justice for once would actually win. He sat on that rock for a long time, his ankle throbbing, his heart aching with worry and fear and something else, something that felt dangerously like love. The sky above him was vast and filled with stars, indifferent to human suffering, indifferent to the small dramas of justice and injustice playing out beneath their ancient light. But Sam was not indifferent. He cared. He cared so much it hurt worse than his ankle. And that caring, that refusal to stop feeling despite all the pain it brought, was what made him human. What made him worthy of the promise Neshoba had just made. What made him believe, despite everything, that tomorrow might actually be better than today. He closed his eyes and waited for dawn, holding on to that belief with both hands, refusing to let go. Dawn found Sam still sitting on that rock, his ankle swollen to twice its normal size, his body stiff from the cold night air. He had not slept, had barely moved, listening to every sound in the darkness, waiting for either Neshoba's return or the arrival of Whitmore's men. Neither had come. The night had passed in terrible empty silence. As the sun rose, painting the desert in shades of pink and gold, Sam forced himself to stand. The pain that shot through his ankle nearly buckled his knees, but he gritted his teeth and bore it. He could not stay here exposed and vulnerable. He needed to find cover somewhere he could hide and rest until Neshoba returned, or he healed enough to ride. Using his rifle as a makeshift crutch, Sam hobbled to his horse and somehow managed to pull himself into the saddle. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his leg, but he pushed through it. Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. He needed to survive long enough to see this through. He rode slowly, carefully, looking for a defensible position. After an hour of careful searching, he found a small canyon with a narrow entrance and a spring at its back. The walls were high enough to provide shade and protection, and there was grass for his horse. It would do. Sam made camp as best he could with one functioning leg. He unsaddled his horse, hobbled it near the spring, and gathered what deadwood he could find for a fire. The simple tasks took him 3 times as long as they should have, and by the time he finished he was exhausted and sweating despite the cool morning air. He sat with his back against the canyon wall, his rifle across his lap, his ankle elevated on his saddle, and tried not to think about all the ways this could still go wrong. Neshoba could be captured before reaching Fort Apache. The documents could be dismissed as forgeries. Marshal Daniels could be overruled by higher authorities already in Whitmore's pocket. The federal troops could arrive and simply arrest everyone first and ask questions later. But he could not afford to think like that. He had to believe, had to trust that the truth was strong enough, that justice still existed somewhere in this broken system, that good people could still triumph over evil if they refused to give up. The sun climbed higher. Sam dozed intermittently, never quite sleeping, always alert for the sound of approaching horses. His ankle throbbed with steady, relentless pain. He knew he should probably soak it in the cold spring water, but moving seemed like an insurmountable task. So he sat and waited and tried to have faith. It was early afternoon when he heard horses, multiple riders approaching the canyon entrance. Sam's hand tightened on his rifle. He struggled to his feet, putting all his weight on his good leg, and positioned himself where he had cover but could see the entrance. 3 horses appeared. The lead rider was Neshoba, and Sam felt relief flood through him so powerfully it nearly knocked him down. Behind her rode Doc Fletcher and incredibly Marshal John Daniels himself. They were all alive. They were all here. That had to mean something good. Neshoba dismounted before her horse had fully stopped and ran to Sam, her eyes sweeping over him, checking for injuries beyond the obvious ankle. "You are alive," she said, and her voice carried such relief that Sam felt his throat tighten. "So are you. That's all that matters." He looked past her to the marshal. "You came yourself." Daniels dismounted more slowly, his weathered face unreadable. "I did. Because what's in those documents you stole changes everything, Mackenzie. Everything." Doc Fletcher was already kneeling beside Sam, examining his ankle with professional hands. "Badly sprained, just as Neshoba said. You're lucky it's not broken. You won't be walking properly for at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. "I'll manage," Sam said. "Marshal, what happens now?" Daniels pulled out the leather satchel and tapped it significantly. "Now we have a choice to make. The legal route or the direct route. The legal route means I take these documents to the territorial court, file charges against Whitmore, and hope that the system works. It could take weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, the federal warrant for Neshoba's arrest is still active. The troops are still coming. Whitmore still has his men and his money and his influence." "And the direct route?" Sam asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "The direct route means we confront Whitmore publicly. We bring these documents to Red Rock, gather the townspeople, show them what their supposed benefactor has been planning. We let the people decide what justice looks like. It's messy, it's not entirely legal, but it's fast, and it might actually work." "It is also dangerous," Neshoba said. "Whitmore will not surrender peacefully. He will fight." "Yes," Daniels agreed. "He will, which is why I'm giving you both a choice. You've done enough. More than enough. You can take Lily and disappear into the mountains with Red Sky Walker's people. I'll take these documents through official channels, do everything by the book. It might not work, but at least you'll be safe." Sam looked at Neshoba. She looked back at him. In that moment he saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They had come too far to run now. They had risked too much to let someone else finish the fight. And more than that, they had a responsibility. To Lily. To Red Sky Walker's people. To everyone who had ever been victimized by men like Clayton Whitmore. "We stand," Sam said quietly. "We face him. We end this." Neshoba nodded. "Together. As family. As we have done from the beginning." Marshal Daniels smiled just a small curve of his lips. "I was hoping you'd say that, because I've spent 30 years watching men like Whitmore get away with murder and theft, and I'm tired of it. I'm too old and too close to retirement to care anymore about politics or career advancement. I just want to see justice done once before I die. Real justice. The kind that makes a difference." Doc Fletcher finished wrapping Sam's ankle with strips of cloth torn from his medical bag. "Well then, gentlemen and lady, if we're going to do this, we should do it right. Whitmore's power comes from people's fear of him. If we can break that fear, if we can show the townspeople of Red Rock that he's just a greedy man who's been manipulating them, his power evaporates." "We need witnesses," Neshoba said. "Not just documents. People who will stand up and tell what they know." "Pete will testify," Daniels said. "I already spoke with him. He's ready. And there are others. A rancher named Morrison whose land Whitmore tried to steal 3 years ago. A miner who was beaten by Whitmore's men for asking about fair wages. A woman whose husband disappeared after threatening to report Whitmore to the territorial governor. They're all afraid, but if they see others standing up, if they see that they're not alone, they might find their courage." "Then we give them that chance," Sam said. "We show them they're not alone. We show them that ordinary people can still fight back and win." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Daniels would return to Red Rock ahead of them, quietly gathering the people who might be willing to stand witness. Doc Fletcher would spread word through the surrounding ranches and mining camps that something important was happening, that everyone should come to Red Rock tomorrow at noon. Sam Neshoba and several Apache warriors that Red Sky Walker would send would arrive at the appointed time with the documents and the witnesses and confront Whitmore in front of the entire town. It was risky. It depended on people finding courage they might not have. It assumed Whitmore would not simply start shooting. But it was also the right thing to do, the just thing, the only thing that might actually change something, instead of just punishing one man while leaving the system that enabled him intact. As Daniels and Doc Fletcher prepared to ride out, the marshal paused beside Sam. "You know this could go badly, Mackenzie. Whitmore has 20 men, maybe more. If it comes to shooting, a lot of people could die." "I know," Sam said. "But if we don't try, if we just let him win because we're afraid, then we're already dead. Just in a different way." Daniels nodded slowly. Your wife would be proud of you, the half-Navajo woman you married. She taught you well. She taught me that honor is not something you talk about. It's something you live, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. After they left, Sam and Neshoba sat together by the small fire she had built. The sun was setting and the canyon walls glowed orange and red in the fading light. Tomorrow would be the test. Tomorrow would determine whether all their struggle had meaning or was just another tragedy in a land full of tragedies. Are you afraid? Neshoba asked, echoing the question she had asked him days before. Terrified, Sam admitted. But I'm also hopeful, and I think that's more important. Fear just tells you that you might lose something worth keeping. Hope tells you it's worth fighting for anyway. Neshoba moved closer to him, and he put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her against his side. They sat like that as darkness fell. Two people who had been strangers less than 2 weeks ago, now bound together by something stronger than blood, deeper than law, more permanent than any ceremony could make official. When this is over, Neshoba said quietly, when Whitmore is defeated and Lily is safe and we can breathe without fear, I want to build a life with you. Not because tradition demands it, not because we are bound by rescue or covenant, but because you are the first man since Neol who has made me want to hope again, who has made me believe that love is possible even in a world this cruel. Sam tightened his arm around her. I want that too, more than I've wanted anything in a very long time. You and Lily, you've given me back my life. You've reminded me what it means to care about something beyond just surviving another day. I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I want you in it. They kissed, then longer this time, deeper, a promise and a commitment and a defiance of all the forces trying to tear them apart. When they finally pulled back, both of them were breathing hard, and Sam could see tears on Neshoba's cheeks, though whether they were from sorrow or joy or simply release, he could not tell. The night passed slowly. They took turns keeping watch. Though Sam suspected Neshoba barely slept during her rest periods, too wound up with anticipation and fear for what tomorrow would bring. As dawn approached, riders appeared at the canyon entrance. Red Skywalker himself came along with Young Bear and 8 other warriors. The old chief dismounted with the careful movements of someone whose body had seen too many battles, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He spoke to Neshoba in Apache, a long conversation that Sam could not follow. Then Young Bear translated for Sam's benefit. Red Skywalker says the time for hiding is past. The time for accepting injustice is past. Tomorrow the Apache stand with you in the light, not in shadows. Tomorrow we show the white man's town that we are not the savages they call us. We are people who want only what they want: peace, justice, the right to raise our children without fear. He says you have honored the old ways, Samuel Mackenzie. You have become family not in word but in deed, and family stands together when the battle comes. Sam struggled to his feet, ignoring the pain in his ankle, and faced Red Skywalker. He did not speak the language, but he hoped respect translated across all barriers. He placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head, and Red Skywalker returned the gesture with grave dignity. They rode out at mid-morning, a strange procession that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. A white rancher who could barely sit his horse because of his injured ankle. An Apache woman accused of murder. An elderly chief and his warriors, all of them heading toward a town that had wanted them dead or gone, now demanding to be heard, demanding justice, demanding change. As they approached Red Rock, Sam could see that word had spread. The streets were full of people, far more than the town's usual population. Ranchers had come in from the surrounding country. Miners had left their claims. Families stood in doorways watching. Marshal Daniels had done his job well. The audience was assembled. In the center of town, in front of the bank building that housed Whitmore's office, a makeshift platform had been erected. Clayton Whitmore stood on it, surrounded by his men, looking confident and imperious. Sheriff Bradley stood beside him, looking far less confident. his eyes darting nervously over the crowd. But when Whitmore saw Sam and Neshoba approaching, when he saw Red Sky Walker and the Apache warriors riding openly through his town, his expression changed. The confidence cracked, revealing anger, and beneath that, the first flicker of fear. Marshal Daniels stepped onto the platform, his voice trained by years of courtroom testimony carried across the crowd. "People of Red Rock and all those who have come from the surrounding territory, we are here today to address accusations, to present evidence, and to determine the truth. Not behind closed doors in some distant courthouse, but here in the light of day where all can see and hear." "This is outrageous," Whitmore blustered. "I am being ambushed by a renegade marshal, a criminal Apache woman, and a man who is wanted for theft and assault. This is not justice. This is a lynch mob." "Then let's talk about lynch mobs," Daniel said coldly. "Let's talk about the mob you hired to drive Apache families from their land. Let's talk about the murder you covered up and blamed on an innocent woman. Let's talk about your plans to start a war so you could steal silver from land that doesn't belong to you." He held up the documents Sam and Neshoba had stolen. "These papers, taken from Mr. Whitmore's own office, detail everything. His correspondence with corrupt officials, his contracts with hired guns, his maps showing which Apache lands he intended to seize, his weapons purchases to arm a private army, all of it planned months before the murder of his foreman McAllister, all of it designed to drive out the Apache and make himself even richer than he already is." A murmur ran through the crowd, people pressing closer, wanting to hear, wanting to see. Whitmore's face had gone red. "Those documents were illegally obtained. They prove nothing." "Then let's hear from witnesses," Daniel said. "People who saw what really happened. People who know the truth." Pete stepped forward first, climbing onto the platform with shaking legs but steady voice. He told his story, how he had seen Cole murder McAllister, how Whitmore had threatened him into silence, how he had carried the guilt ever since. Then came Morrison, the rancher whose land Whitmore had tried to steal. Then the miner who had been beaten. Then the widow whose husband had disappeared. One by one they came forward. One by one they found their courage in the presence of others who shared their stories. And as they spoke, Sam watched the crowd's mood change, saw anger replace fear, saw recognition dawn on faces that had been carefully neutral. These people had known something was wrong. They had felt it, but been too afraid to name it, too isolated to challenge it. Now they saw they were not alone. Now they understood they had been manipulated, used, kept divided, so one man could grow rich on their fear. Whitmore saw it too. Sam watched the calculation happen behind those cold eyes, saw the moment Whitmore decided that words would not save him, that only violence could stop this now. The rich man's hand moved toward the gun at his hip. "Don't!" Sam called out, his voice cutting through the crowd noise. He had dismounted, was standing on his one good leg, his rifle steady in his hands despite the pain. "Don't make it worse than it already is." "You've destroyed me," Whitmore snarled. "You and that Apache whore. I'll kill you both before I let you take what's mine." The slur hung in the air, ugly and hateful. Sam felt rage surge through him, hot and red, but before he could move, before he could respond, Neshoba stepped forward. She climbed onto the platform, walking toward Whitmore with her head high, her bearing proud. "I am not a whore," she said, her accented English clear and strong. "I am a mother. I am a daughter of the Chiricahua people. I am a woman who has done nothing wrong except exist on land you wanted to steal. You call me savage, but it is you who murder and lie and destroy. It is you who has no honor. You are the savage here, Clayton Whitmore. And these people, your people, they see it now. They know what you are." She turned to face the crowd. "I did not kill McAllister. I did not burn the warehouse. I am guilty only of being Apache in a place where one man decided that was crime enough. But I will not run. I will not hide. I stand here and say to all of you, I am human just as you are. My daughter deserves a future just as yours do. And if you let men like Whitmore decide who is worthy of justice and who is not, then none of you are safe. Today it is me. Tomorrow it could be any of you who stand in his way." The silence that followed was profound. Then from the back of the crowd someone began to clap, slowly at first, then faster. Others joined in. The applause grew, spreading through the crowd like fire through dry grass. People who had been afraid, who had been complicit through their silence, were finding their voice. Whitmore saw his power crumbling, saw it in the faces around him, in the way his own men were stepping back, unwilling to die for a cause that had just been revealed as nothing but greed. He drew his gun in desperation, swinging it toward Neshoba. Three things happened simultaneously. Sam fired his bullet, striking Whitmore's gun hand and sending the weapon flying. Young Bear's arrow took Sheriff Bradley in the shoulder as the corrupt lawman tried to draw on Marshal Daniels. And the crowd surged forward, not with violence but with presence, surrounding the platform, making it clear through sheer numbers that this was over. Whitmore collapsed to his knees, clutching his bleeding hand, his face a mask of pain and defeat. Marshal Daniels produced handcuffs and secured him. Sheriff Bradley, wounded but not critically, surrendered without resistance. The hired guns who had filled Whitmore's ranks simply melted away into the crowd, vanishing like smoke, unwilling to fight for a man who could no longer pay them. It was over, just like that. Not with a glorious battle or a dramatic shootout, but with the simple power of truth spoken loud enough that it could not be ignored, and people who decided they had been silent long enough. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and official actions. Marshal Daniels took Whitmore and Bradley to Fort Huachuca to face federal charges. The evidence from the documents, combined with the testimony of multiple witnesses, was overwhelming. Whitmore was sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. Bradley was stripped of his badge and given 5 years for corruption and accepting bribes. The federal warrant for Neshoba's arrest was dismissed. The accusations of Apache uprising were revealed as fabrications. The territorial governor, embarrassed by the scandal and eager to appear, just issued a proclamation expanding the Apache reservation and providing official recognition of Red Sky Walker's band as permanent residents with legal protections. And in the midst of all this legal and political activity, life at Mackenzie Creek continued, transformed in ways both large and small. Sam's ankle healed slowly, and during those weeks when he could do little but sit on his porch and rest, Neshoba and Lily became permanent fixtures in his home and his life, not as refugees or protected persons, but as family in the truest sense. Lily called him Boss Sam, without hesitation, now climbing into his lap to hear stories, helping him with small tasks around the ranch, her laughter filling spaces that had been silent for too long. The ranch itself changed too. Red Sky Walker's people built several cabins nearby, creating a small community that bridged two worlds. Apache and white settlers worked side by side, sharing skills and knowledge, building something new from the ruins of old hatreds and old fears. Maria Santos became a frequent visitor, bringing supplies and gossip and her shrewd observations about life. Doc Fletcher rode out every week to check on patients, both Apache and white, making no distinction in the quality of his care. Young Bear, who had been suspicious of Sam at first, became a close friend, teaching him Apache ways of tracking and survival while learning from Sam about ranching and horse training. 6 months after the confrontation in Red Rock, on a warm autumn evening with the sky painted orange and gold, Sam and Neshoba were married. The ceremony was performed by Red Sky Walker, according to Apache tradition, and then Doc Fletcher read words from the Christian Bible that Sam's late wife had loved. Two cultures, two traditions, blended into something unique and beautiful. Lily stood between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands, beaming with joy. After they exchanged vows, Sam lifted the girl into his arms and she whispered in his ear, "Now you are really my Ba, forever and ever, forever and ever." Sam agreed, his throat tight with emotion. That night, as the celebration continued outside with food and music and the mingling of two peoples who had learned they had more in common than they had differences, Sam and Neshoba stood together on their porch, looking out at the land that was now truly theirs. "What are you thinking?" Neshoba asked, leaning against him. I'm thinking about how much can change in such a short time. 2 months ago I was alone, convinced I would die alone, believing that caring about anyone was just inviting more pain. Now I have a family, a community, a reason to wake up every morning and be grateful. The river brought us together, Neshoba said softly. When you pulled Lily from the water, you saved more than just her life. You saved all three of us. You saved me from grief and fear. You saved yourself from loneliness and despair. And you saved Lily from growing up without hope. No, Sam said, pulling her closer. You saved me. You and Lily. You reminded me what I was capable of. You showed me that love is not weakness, that family is not just blood, that justice is worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the cabin, Lily was already asleep, exhausted from the day's excitement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, the daily tasks of building a life together. But tonight, they had this moment of perfect peace, perfect contentment. Tell me, Neshoba said after a while, when our children ask how we met, how their father and mother came together, what will you say? Sam smiled. I'll tell them the truth, that sometimes when you do the right thing for the right reasons, the universe rewards you in ways you never expected. I'll tell them about a little girl who needed saving, a mother who taught me about honor, and a covenant that became something far more precious than either of us imagined. I'll tell them that family is not just born. Sometimes it's built piece by piece through courage and sacrifice and the stubborn refusal to let evil win. That is a good story, Neshoba said. A true story, the kind worth passing down through generations. Yes, Sam agreed. The kind that reminds people that even in the darkest times, even in the harshest places, love can take root and grow. That justice can triumph. That ordinary people, when they stand together, can change the world. The night deepened around them, but the cabin behind them glowed with warm light. From the nearby Apache dwellings, a voice rose in song, soon joined by others, the ancient melodies blending with the night wind. It was a song about home, about belonging, about the eternal human need for connection and community. Sam Mackenzie had come to Arizona Territory to escape the world, to hide from pain, to wait for death in solitude. Instead, he had found life. Not the life he had planned or expected, but something infinitely more precious. He had found purpose. He had found love. He had found proof that redemption was possible, that second chances existed, that a man could rise from the ashes of his own grief and build something beautiful. And as he stood there with Neshoba in his arms, with Lily sleeping peacefully inside, with a community of friends and family surrounding them, Sam understood something fundamental. This was what mattered, not wealth or power or the approval of distant authorities. Just this, just love and honor and the quiet knowledge that you had fought for something worth keeping and won. The story that had begun with a frightened child in a river had become a story about the best parts of humanity, about courage in the face of injustice, about love that crossed cultural boundaries, about the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. It was a story worth living, a story worth remembering, a story that would echo down through the generations, reminding those who came after that honor was not just an old-fashioned word, but a living principle. That family was defined not by blood alone, but by the bonds we chose to honor. That justice, though it might be delayed and difficult and demanded sacrifice, was always worth pursuing. And in the Arizona Territory of 1882, under a sky full of eternal stars, that story became legend. Not the kind of legend that gets exaggerated in the telling, but the kind that gets passed down precisely because it is true, because it reminds us of who we can be when we are brave enough to care, strong enough to stand, and wise enough to recognize that in the end, love and honor are the only legacies that truly matter. Sam and Neshoba Mackenzie would live long lives together, raising Lily and 3 more children who would grow up fluent in both English and Apache, comfortable in both worlds, proof that bridges could be built and hatred could be overcome. Their ranch would become a place of refuge and hope for anyone who needed it, regardless of color or culture or circumstances. But that is a story for another time. Tonight, as the celebration continued and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, the story that mattered was simpler and more profound. It was the story of how one act of kindness, one moment of courage, one refusal to accept injustice could change not just individual lives, but an entire community. It was the story of honor. And honor, as Sam Mackenzie had learned, was the most powerful force in the world.